Good morning, everybody. Time for the Sheriff's Sit Down, presented by our great friends at Our Community Credit Union, where holiday quick bucks are back. Make sure you check out with them at ourcu.com. Mason County Sheriff Casey Salisbury is here with me this morning. Morning, Casey. Who do you have with you?
Well, Jeff, I couldn't think of a more fitting time than to have a military chaplain with, given it Pearl Harbor Day, and to have the chaplain maybe speak out on that issue or just on any issue. But I have Chaplain Harris, retired from the United States Army as a colonel, and we'll put him on and let him talk.
Chaplain, good to hear from you again. How have you been?
I've been doing good, Jeff. We really have. It's been okay, keeping the spirits up.
I like to hear that. And now, this time of the year, more than ever, a good time to keep those spirits up. What do you have to share with us today?
Well, it is Pearl Harbor Day, and I know, good grief, hard to believe. I'm old enough now that it still is memorable for me because of my parents' generation. But I know we're losing a lot. For a lot of our listeners, they may be going, "What day?" And so I encourage folks to. We got this wonderful thing called the internet. When it's used right, look it up, because we find some amazing stories. One that I always think of on this day when the forces of Japan bombed the American naval base at Pearl Harbor, I always think of Dory Miller, who was an American sailor on board a ship at that time. In fact, he was one of the forgotten ones, that we would say, because he was an African-American cook. And yet, when his ship was being bombed and his comrades were literally fighting for their lives, Dory Miller ran up on deck and began tending to the wounded, and without training, manned an anti-aircraft gun and shot down a Japanese plane. He would become the first Black American to be awarded the Navy Cross, the second highest decoration for valor awarded by the Navy after the Medal of Honor.
Wow.
Miller was just an example of the kinds of men and women with those nurses on that day who stood up and cared for their comrades. When I think about that, I'm reminded of the late Norman Cousins, who was faced with the prospect of an incurable disease, decided to take matters into his own hands, and dedicated periods of each day to doing nothing but watching funny movies, reading funny stories, and laughing. His experience led him to search for proof that faith and hope and laughter affect the factors that can actually combat serious diseases. In his book, Head First, he describes the cases of two patients that he studied. One man, diagnosed with a fatal disease, remarkably recovered. The other, a lady in the same hospital for a relatively minor surgery, suddenly took a turn for the worse and died. The only difference he could determine was that each had mistakenly overheard medical staff discussing what they thought were their cases. The woman heard a doctor say she has TS and thought he meant a terminal situation, when in fact it was only an acronym for her mild condition. The man heard another doctor say, well, who'd have thought he'd made it? And assumed that he was talking about him. In both cases, they were mistaken in their understandings, but it didn't matter. Their minds responded to what they heard, and so did their bodies. On this day, Pearl Harbor Day, I am grateful for that greatest generation who not only on this day, but for the 4 years that would follow, literally led the way. And afterwards, for those of us who are part of that horrendous baby boom generation, showed us how attitude and courage and determination could not only win against tyranny, but more importantly, could build and even rebuild a nation. And so on this Pearl Harbor Day, that's the message I want to share with our community and our listeners.
Always a great message that comes from you, Sheriff Salisbury, as we move closer through the end of, this year and into the winter. If you're able to pull Chaplin into these calls a little more often, I think he's just the voice we need to hear as the winter starts to get dark around here.
Well, I will do that. I know that he is retired, but I think he has a long list of things at home to do. But as often as I can get on that list, we'll try to get him in.
That'd be great. Chaplain, good to hear your voice. Good to hear from you. Casey, it's always good to talk with you as well during the Sheriff Sit Down presented by our Community Credit Union. Be well, guys. We'll talk again.
Take care, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff. Bye-bye.